I'm Clint, and welcome to Swatch's Art Live Stream number 93. I'm going to unmute our guests here. We have two guests with us. Special guest Tyler Edlin is joining us. Tyler, man, how's it going?
Clint, thank you for having me on today. It's a pleasure being here. I'm really excited for this.
Well, it's very cool to have you. I know that I've watched you progress as an artist. I watch your videos, and it is really good to have you on here because I think a lot of people that know of my work and my materials are very familiar with yours as well. They bring up your name quite a bit. And as usual, we also have Anna with us, moderator here at Swatches. And she's just in audio, though. We don't have her video feed right now. But Anna, good to have you.
Hi everyone, hope you're doing well.
Yeah. Guys, if you have questions for Tyler or I during the course of the live stream, Anna is going to be keeping an eye on the chat and she will pass along any questions. So if you do have questions for us, and certainly if you're one of the artists whose work we're looking at during the stream today, feel free. Drop in a question or ask for a clarification, whatever the case may be, and let us know, and we'll try to get that answered. So, as usual, let's also just run through some announcements of what is going on with the stream today and other things going on with the Swatches community. And then we will jump into actually reviewing the art for this episode. So, if you are not familiar, somehow you follow my channel, but you're not familiar with Tyler's work and what he is doing, then go check out tyleredlinart.com, or where else might they go for more up-to-date information?
Brushsauceacademy.com.
Brush Sauce Academy.
Clint's got my website from 8 to 10 years ago, and it's all right. It'll still funnel your info to me.
Yeah, Tyler, you've got tutorials, you've got mentorships. Can you kind of outline what you generally cover in your materials?
I'm
Yeah.
I'm trying to cover art education for people of all budgets. Because right, I
Hmm.
think before you go to art school, you get broke. Mentorships in general, they're still kind of pricier, still cheaper than
Yeah.
tuition. But again, anything from like Gumroads, like individual lessons,
Hmm.
to more full-on feedback related things. Like on that's when I started on Patreon this year to offer feedback and to provide
Yeah.
much more in-depth lessons and stuff. So there's kind of three different tiers on all those things. So yeah, I'm trying to cover mostly art fundamentals now, just really going back. I'm calling them kind of like deep dives. I'm
I
picking
like
one
that.
topic and
Yeah.
I'm just hammering it in. Like I had like my last course was like it ended up being 6 hours long, and I was just talking about composition. So it's like I find I'm learning a lot as I'm going as well, and it's just a lot of fun. And eventually I'll go to more technique
Hmm.
based approaches.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point to bring up. Tyler is particularly good with compositions. He spent a lot of time studying what makes a good composition. He's good at teaching it and explaining it, and he has some excellent videos out there showing where he gets uh, basic or sort of generic compositions and really utilizes the elements in the scene to make it more dynamic and more interesting. So if you do struggle with the issues of composition and developing a scene and arranging the elements in there, go check out his stuff, and I think you're really going to be able to find that useful.
Clint, can you move Tyler's video a little bit? He is probably
Yeah,
not
I don't know
very
if it's
visible.
my cam or I was watching the chat.
We see a very nice trained arm, but that's all.
Oh, I see that there. I'm cropped up. Let me flex for
Okay.
the next time you get it in there.
Did you go to the gym today?
It's this way to the
Good.
art shelf.
Ah, okay.
Oh, it's my window is too
Yeah,
wide. Okay, hang on.
that's the software you were talking about. I gotta check out.
There we go. Let's.
OBS. I gotta write that down. Try that for my streams.
Yeah, this is. I'm actually using Streamlab OBS, which is usually connected to Twitch, but I
Mm,
use it for YouTube as well.
I'm writing that one down.
And they're both free to use. I mean, they're not anything you have to buy, but it can be a little confusing when you first get into it. So, I mean, feel free to like message me, and I can walk through. that with you. You need to set that up. Okay, so other stuff going on. If you haven't been around the channel for very long, you might not realize that we have a second weekly live stream. This one is on Wednesdays, and it is for channel members only. This is a paint over specific stream. It is not based on any of the art challenges. Each person, each member can submit in one image. It is a lottery draw for the paint overs. There are 2 tiers, and you have to be the second tier, which is $5 a month. And there's the 4 live streams that you get to join. And right now, there's not that many members, so you actually have a really good chance of getting your image receiving a paint over. It is less education based. I'm not necessarily out there to explain the principles and to teach. It's more just about kind of sitting down and chatting and just enjoying watching a paint over. So that's going on. If you're interested in that, then just head over to any of the pages, probably in this video, underneath where it says subscribe, there is probably a join button as well. Now, I've got a new video coming out called Your Brain is Sabotaging Your Art, or it'll be some little variation of that. I put together some... Oh, actually, I could get your opinion on this. What cover do you think looks best? There, Tyler. I've got a couple of different ideas for the video cover.
My opinion, either maybe like the second one for the standard kind of YouTube with the portrait sort of view, but if you're going with the art one, the bottom one. So 2 or 4 would get my vote.
Okay. Now, I do have a poll out in the Facebook group. Now, I don't have the bottom one. I made that one just a couple of minutes ago because the first one was getting a lot of comments, but I thought it might be better to have one that had color in it. So I made that one as well. But yeah, this video, I think it's a really good topic. I edited it down from like a 45-minute video down to a 15-minute video, so it is chock full of really good information put together in a way that I haven't heard anybody say it before, and about how your preconceived ideas of that your brain holds affects the way that you draw, and you need to be able to identify what those are so that you can try to correct it. Anyway, that will be coming up probably next week. This Saturday, yeah, tomorrow, is kicking off these Group 2 of the Art Challenge. Thanks for bearing with me through all this. I always have to run through some of this stuff, Tyler. So,
Cool.
The Group 2 of the Artifacts and Elementals Art Challenge, the tickets to join in that challenge will be coming up tomorrow. And this one is a Magic the Gathering theme. You will have the option to choose between one of 4 different subjects. And they branch into 2 different groups. Artifacts. You can choose the Horn of Sorrows, which is like a trumpet-style horn, and you can choose between that and the puzzle box. Some Hayden's puzzle box. Anyway, it's a golden brass sort of logic box that somebody's trying to open. The next ones are Elementals, a horror-based earth undead elemental in the plane of Innistrad, and a water-based elemental in the land of Theros. So if you want to jump into any of those, get feedback on the live stream, pick up a ticket tomorrow. And I did open up some more dates for the Our Mentorship. If there's something that you want to talk about, and it could be problem solving an image that you're on, it could be talking about just motivation with your art or outlining what you need for your art education, you can schedule just a 1-hour consult. Go at art-mentor.com and we'll go over whatever you need to with where you are with your art journey. Anna, anything that you want to add to that, or any additional information that you want to toss out about what you've got going on, Tyler?
No, I'm still on for the ride. This is good. I don't have much going on. Just I had a newborn a week and a half ago, and then I was out of power for a whole week. So I'm trying to put my life together.
Yeah, Tyler's got a lot going on. We tried to get you on last week, but you sent me that photo of like, well, here's the tree laying over top of my power line. Like, okay, well, that's not going to work.
Clint, I'd like to say I do have an open hangout session I should probably mention, like every
Oh,
Monday
okay.
night at 9 p.m. Eastern, and I have links to the Discord that information is provided
Mm-hmm.
in every YouTube video I have. And my moderator, Tim, is in the chat as well. I'm sure Tim can answer any questions if there's anything specific about
Yeah.
that. But yeah, come drop by, have a
And
drink, and drink and draw. It's a great time, very casual.
what's the
No
platform there? Where is that located?
we just do Google Hangouts because that's
Google
still a
Hangouts?
thing
Okay.
apparently.
I
They
use
said
it.
that was leaving, but it's still there and it's still up. And we've had like a permalink,
Yeah.
set for the last 2 or 3 years we've been doing it.
Yeah, if anybody has a link to that, feel free to just drop it in the chat, and we'll make sure that as you're watching this, or even in recording, that you can see what that is and follow that.
Yeah, Tim, feel free to drop any kind of link to the
Yeah,
Discord.
yeah.
That's fine. Every Monday night at 9, unless I say otherwise. And they'll show up without me, so they're a good batch. They're a good group.
Cool. All right, so let's jump into these images. We're 15 minutes in. That seems about right. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. We only have 9 images. Okay. 12 tickets, but not everybody always submits. Things come up in life. We're going to start with Alexi. Open them, just going alphabetically here. All right. So here's Alexi's image. I do give everyone the chance to write in a question or comment if they want to, and I'll try to address it. And they have a couple of things. So they know it's not finished, but I feel like I'm understanding what specific parts should be worked on. Watched a metric ton of videos, found a lot of references, made 24 different drafts. I like this. Progressed immensely. First thing that I want to comment on here is, yes, it has. I went ahead and grabbed your old sketch over here, and we just talked about the composition a lot last time, and that you were kind of removed a bit from the scene, and everything was kind of the same size. And so over here, you've picked a lower camera angle. The foreground character is a lot bigger. You got a wider range of color in the scene. There feels like there's more energy there. But there's certainly a lot of things that we could still do to correct this. What strikes you here, Tyler? What do you see in this image that maybe Alexi could do to hone this to a better direction?
I think that the sense of space gets a little skewed in a way that, like, okay, we know that there's a Dutch angle going on, right? We have the axis of the horizon tilted, but in a way, the characters are still kind of resting on that bottom plane. Like they're not kind of shifting with the camera tilt. And
Right.
when that's happening, both characters' feet are also at the bottom of the picture plane, which kind of creates a tangent in itself that most people try to avoid. You either have a character cropped out or have the character in the frame.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
then I liked some of the I was looking at the sketches. I think some of the sketches had a little bit better of a flow. Like the one, where was it? I think it was the upper, maybe it's that one to the left of the orange frame one. Like I think it's just a little less intense. Yeah, that one.
Mm-hmm.
I think the angle of the Stonehenge, right, the pillars, I think are a little more pleasing in the how it flows to the character and stuff.
Yeah.
That would have been my pick, but
Yeah, I'm with you. I think maybe a little overcompensated with how much angle we're getting on everything. It certainly does catch me that Robocop's foot is like literally right there on the edge of the canvas. And so that's something we want to adjust. I don't have any problem with things like, the end of the cloak going out of the scene. In fact, that can actually be a good asset for you. But we've got a lot of space even going on up here that really isn't being utilized in any significant way. And I'm also having to look at, well, if this is the actual angle and this pillar is upright, then let's adjust this just so we see that. Look how far back RoboCop is actually leaning. Like, if those pillars are upright, he's falling backwards. He's not running. And so it's this split between he's like in a running pose, but angle-wise, he would literally have to be falling backwards. So we need to find a balance between there and make sure that the characters are positioned in a way that it also follows, like Tyler, you were saying, the tilt of the whole scene. But no, okay, then moving past that, as far as like lighting, background, what would you do with some of that stuff to kind of move that forwards?
Well, yeah, I think for me there'd be two parts to that. I think there's like the world's lighting, right? The lighting in the scene, and then I think there's how that's lighting that's getting applied to the materials, right? Which it probably additionally needs more attention because it's almost like a lot of the materials, like the rock or like the stone there to like RoboCop's armor, they're kind of rendered like they're the same
Yeah.
sort of material, and separating those two elements alone, especially since he's kind of like a focal element, that'll create a huge boost in the quality, of
Yeah.
that image. And then I think giving that lighting like a little bit more of like a physical presence. In 3D terms, they call it like a volume, or I call it
Mm-hmm.
physical light. Often you could see it with like light rays, but not like literally light rays, but like having that the light of the fireball, like kind of illuminating some of the dust and the smoke
Mm-hmm.
coming around toward these old pillars and stuff. And I think for me now that I've been looking at it, I guess if the character, the wizard, or the because I'm not familiar with the left character. I'm well versed with RoboCop,
Uh,
but like I guess it's like a fire and ice type magic. But I didn't quite read it as that at first. I was kind of like, what is that blue snake, that's coming
mm-hmm.
through to RoboCop? So I I think I don't know. Maybe there's a way to kind of balance or simplify that compositionally, but I don't know. Maybe it has to do more with the type of character that's using both the water magic and the fire magic at the
Yeah,
same
he had
time.
chose Morgana Le Fay, the apprentice that went against Merlin.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's no clear indication of what she's supposed to look like. So that's
So
kind of what he came up with.
I guess naturally, like when there's a tendency to have a very complicated scene in battle like this, I think when in doubt, simplify. Pick like
Mm-hmm.
ice or fire, right? Like, because then you're juggling a whole other type of light source that's going to be bouncing light, going to be affecting all the material. It exponentially complicates things.
Yes.
And if your skill level is already getting pushed right at each stage at its threshold, do yourself a favor, take a little bit of weight off that, right? And
Mm-hmm.
just pick fire or ice, and then you'll only have to calculate that one type of light source and how that affects each of the materials.
No, it's so true, and I've talked about it before, and that is how you light your scene drastically affects how long it takes to paint and how difficult it is to paint.
Mm-hmm.
You add in difficult light sources and hard angles, and it's going to take you way longer to render that thing and make it look good. And ice, like rendering ice that has a fire glow on it.
Yes.
I mean,
Good
you're
luck finding a good reference on that. It will take you an hour or two.
Anna. We were talking yesterday about her scene, and she's got like this really bright blue glow right next to like a shiny metal armor plate, and
Yeah.
and we're going. It's just inherently difficult,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
and
But the client asked for it. It's not that I planned it.
yeah.
It's just he wanted that. So
And so, yeah, sometimes you are forced by the client that you do have to do this thing. But in this case, Alexi, you're not. I'm with Tyler. I would probably just switch the other ice thing to being fire.
Just some like cinder effects.
Yeah.
Just some like embers bouncing around, and that way you don't have that whole. It's a whole other compositional element in itself, trying to balance that ice going down there. Again, it's the only blue element in the scene, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just like I think this piece will be better for both the artist creating it and then the viewer kind of interpreting everything, just to lose that when in doubt, cut your loss. And
Yeah. And with the character, maybe getting some more of that light along that front edge just to help
mm,
pop out that character against the darker background. Because right now, the dark clothes, there's no problem with that. But when you put that dark against dark background pair, you just start really losing the character. So we can really look at having a nice edge of light across there. And it makes sense because this fireball looks really bright, so it's not really stretching much. Um, I do like they actually turned the character In the first one, we had her like really facing us,
Hmm.
and I think it works better to have more of that back angle to her,
I agree.
or at least more of what you got in that first one concept up here on the top left, where it was sort of in between.
Yeah,
That's
there's
a
a
good
lot of
angle too.
movement. There's a lot of movement in those earlier sketches, and I think it did
Hmm.
stiffen up quite a bit toward the final. And that usually happens. That's right. That's why a lot of people overcompensate on the sketch because they know, okay, once I paint all this up, it's gonna tighten up, and it tightens up every time.
Yep, absolutely. So really good stuff here. I think you're definitely getting progress, and it's more about what you're saying down here in your comment, Alexi, which is it's just not finished yet. I imagine that you would have planned to go handle a lot of this stuff. So hopefully you find some of this useful. I am going to commend that you find something to do with the background, even just going back to the silhouette of the trees with some sky. But right now it's basically one uniform darkness.
I think, yeah, the trick with a complicated battle scene like this is to, regardless of what's happening in the background, right? You can make anything happen in the background, but if you reduce it to simpler shapes and just silhouettes,
Hmm.
get the silhouettes of the characters to read, and then anything important in the background. Start with silhouettes, and then you can light the silhouettes as necessarily as you need to, like having, just like the shape, of like the stone, right, lit behind RoboCop works really
Hmm.
well. But then perhaps as it's going in distance behind where the magic user is on the left, you have that start to fade out into the atmosphere. Add an atmosphere,
Yeah.
right, like right there. It will add the depth to the image, and it will simplify, that structure. Like, again, even where it's really close to being black at the bottom of the pillars as well, at the base of those, like even adding a little bit of ambient light coming in, and just to kind of soften that contrast.
Yeah, I'm curious if you couldn't actually make this other one fire as well, but there would be some sort of blue light source
Mm.
kind of off scene back there that's
Yeah,
just.
just like a fill light, they would do
Yeah.
on staging or set. You just have like a light off cam, and it's just kind of filling in a little bit of the shapes from the opposite angle, and it works every time. You can just invent the light as long as you're
Yeah.
consistent internally. You
That's
can
it.
make up whatever you want.
Yeah, that's what I've been telling some of the guys is put what you need in there and then justify it. You if it
Definitely.
needs to have another light back there, then put it in there, but then just make sure that it stays consistent across the scene, that it's still affecting things correctly. But we don't need to know what's creating light. We just need the light to be there. I really like that idea. But we need to wrap it up on that one. We'll go ahead and move on to the next one. So,
Awesome piece.
as usual, guys, if you do go back and finish those images and implement some of those changes, put them up in the Discord group or the Facebook group and let us see what you end up doing with it. So, next up is Christian, and he has got Ares versus I forgot what her name was from that other game, StarCraft.
Yeah, what is the name of that character? I remember that character. That's always a iconic StarCraft character, but I'm not into StarCraft enough to know the names individually.
I want to say like Harrigan or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Somebody will put it in chat, I'm sure.
Somebody
Anyway,
will.
I know it's not in color, but I tried the results with less than flattering results, I imagine. I didn't know. Ooh, I might have to look at your writing here. And I didn't want to redo the painting again for a third time. I should have gone into coloring phase closer to the sketch phase. Hey, only move into working with colors if the black and white is working. With these challenges, this is about improving your skill. I don't really care if you get to a final image. What I care about is whether you're approving or not. And if you're still struggling with the black and white, then just stick with black and white. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, you're doing yourself a service by doing that. So last time we took a look at it, the poses were just a lot more generic. They were more static, and I'd said, can we get a little more stance out of her? And maybe if he was actually in mid jump, that would be more interesting. And then we kind of talked about what do we want to do with the environment. So you've pushed the lighting with a lot more contrast. You gave some bend to her pose. You got him into a jump. So I think all these things are working. Sarah Kerrigan, there it is, Queen of Blades. Thank you. Appreciate that, Michael. Uh, that was not going to come to me. So you've had a chance to look at this for a moment. What was your thoughts on that, Tyler?
Well, I definitely think it's an improvement over that original for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest thing, two things that distract me from this, you can't read any silhouettes, of the characters. They're either black on black or like light on light. And then it's that white line, that the rip that goes directly through the character. I find that a little distracting. It's
Yeah.
doable, but it's going to need tweaking. But then the main thing is that that right character needs to really get sorted out because it's hard to see the anatomy, shape, and form, and generally overall. Like if I didn't see the reference images, I wouldn't have known what character it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's because we can't see enough of the character, but we can't see the silhouette of that character, which really defines the uniqueness of that character. So it's just
Right.
like, just forcing a little bit of light and shape design in there.
Yeah. I'm completely with you. We have to get these poses and these silhouettes to read. I'm not sure what the idea is of the rip. I don't know. Because it's got like all these symbols on the wall back there. I don't know if it's a
I would just
wall.
soften it and just push it a little further back, just
Yeah.
to get that character, because it's just so high contrast. And we got to like, I still think we need to invent another light somewhere to kind of, illuminate the characters, because
Yeah,
if that's
I'm
the
with
only
you.
light source, that's going to be a bit tough.
Well, usually in these sort of, character versus character duel scenes, you usually do see two different lights in their different
Hmm.
colors, sort of unifying, like, this guy has red colors and she has purple colors, or, some opposing color scheme. So if we had a duller but still, really vibrant, kind of like low light over here to make her look menacing, then that could really work and have that. But then, over here, maybe he has more like orange tones or whatever color that light is. But really, with this one, Christian, we need to have you just develop the black and white and make sure that that is working in the values, and then worry about the colors if you, going to at all.
Yeah, don't sweat the colors.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Now,
for me, what I had to go back to my drawing often because I would try to block and shape so much of the painting out like that, just using, and that works to a degree, but nothing's more pure, right, than just having the drawing and having that functionally work on a structural kind of basis, just because you can see what's wrong with it
mm-hmm.
without getting into details, without even getting into forms or anything fancy like that. But yes, because like it's almost like with the way the claw is going on the left, that almost, I don't know, it feels too forced in a way. It's not like it's terrible, but it's like I wonder if it's like opening that up a little bit. And then I think it's just the tilt of both characters. So it seems like because it's hard to see what that character is like pivoting or jumping off of the
Mm-hmm.
the the um the Spartan there, right? And then that character almost should be at an angle that might be a little more parallel with it or something, because they're, I don't know. It's just like the angle of it all. It's a weird jigsaw puzzle that I would have to like really just kind of move things around.
Yeah. Somebody mentions down here, the wall looks really close, and that's one of the things that hit me as well. Like when I first glanced at it, I felt like the wall was probably just a couple of feet behind him. But then you notice that there's all these little soldiers back here, so evidently that wall is
I didn't notice those. I thought that was the
massive.
ground.
Yeah, no, there's like a whole
I
army
see
back
it
there.
now. I didn't see it at first. I think that's a design problem.
Yeah, so we need a series of planes in between him and these
Higher horizon.
soldiers so that we get the idea that there's levels of overlapping to help give the idea of distance there. Um,
Yeah, it doesn't have the feeling of a battlefield. If and
yeah.
now that seems like that was kind of the original intent, and we want to make that clear. Which you just like they were doing. I think they have the right idea. Just silhouette soldiers,
Hmm.
here and there. But it's like you got to raise the horizon, get us into the shot. It's just I think the biggest thing with this is the lack of structure. Just drawing in the space, the visual, the
Yeah.
three-dimensional space with a horizon, block out even some rough perspective lines so you can visually see how things will converge in the depth and the distance of it, and then you can kind of just pivot around the characters.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
it's the space.
Yeah, well, you've got to understand the volume of how all these things are fitting into that 3D environment. And this can be, what you have right here, Christian, can be great as to getting your head around it and serving as where you basically want the things in your scene. But now you've actually have to, step back a bit, and we need to redraw it, not with the values, not with color, just with your basic forms, and figure out how these things are working. Like Tyler, you're saying, in a 3D environment. We also need a reference for Sarah Kerrigan, because I don't see any references, and that's one of those things that I'm always asking you guys to do is have a reference pose photo, or at least a 3D model for your main characters when you're doing these art challenges, because you're not Proco, and so you can't necessarily just draw this great perfect anatomy off the top of your head, and that's okay. So you can be like me, and I go
Join the
find a
club.
reference. Yes. And so exactly this can be your block in and be like, this is the idea. Okay, now that's the idea. I followed the idea. But now let's go get the actual reference. And it shouldn't be that hard to get, because she basically has a human figure, with the exception of the bone wings or whatever. Everything else, her proportions are basically humanoid. So you could probably find one that's close to that, or go take one. Yeah. All right. Any additional thoughts on that one? What are you thinking? Anything?
Yeah, I would like it just needs more time in the planning stages. And that's like the one phase, right? A lot of people tend to rush through to get to the fun stuff, and it's double up on the planning, on the
Mm-hmm.
referencing, and then the execution will flow a lot easier.
Yeah. I'll mention that in my new material. I guess kind of a plug, but I put together a material. It's out on the store right now on the Swatches Art, called "Understanding Illustration Process," and it is a lot of the highlights compiled together of what I've learned over the last 10 years. It is a lot of the feedback that I keep having to give, and a lot of the problems that I keep seeing, and how to address them from doing these art challenges the last couple of years. And I put it together in this 3.5 hour video. And one of the things I reiterate over and over again is exactly what you're saying, Tyler, which is the more time that you spend in that initial concept sketching phase, the more you're going to save yourself trouble later on. And I'm going to see that novices have a tendency to uh, underestimate the importance of that early stage. Is that something that you see very much in your own stuff, that people
Yeah,
rush
yeah,
through
definitely.
that?
I agree. It's always we're giving the same feedbacks,
Mm-hmm.
and over and over again, because it's the same. It's I think it's a lot of people like, yeah, art fundamentals are one thing, but like learning a process that works for the individual. The process
Yes.
for each of us is managing of those fundamentals, and that's why it can fluctuate greatly. So do whatever you have to, take photos, use 3D, um, and it just weigh your options, and take the necessary steps, and then you can adapt the art fundamentals and the art side of things to create the creative side to the process, and just let it kind of embellish from there.
Absolutely.
So basically, try as many different processes that you can research, that you can find, and see what works best for you, because something that definitely, there's of course a traditional academic approach to things, and that
hmm
always will work. But with all the software today, all the options today, you try some different things out, see what works best for you.
And I think that's really important. And just because I might paint it one way, or Tyler might paint it one way, doesn't mean that's necessarily the way you have to paint it, or that's necessarily even the best way for you to paint it. And so any good illustrator probably knows a half a dozen ways to go about doing an illustration. starting with a reference photo or working from a rough sketch and refining it, or working in full values or working in full colors or using mask or not using mask. So you got a lot of options. And everybody thinks in a little different way. Some people think in terms of values and shapes, and some people think in terms of forms, and some people think in terms of composition and layout. And you go about building your scene mentally in different ways and experiment with those and try them out and go through courses where people use the different ones and find which ones kind of click for you. So, yeah, really good feedback. I appreciate you mentioning that. Okay, next up we have got Kong Lee. And for this one, we're having the characters of the Mind Flayer from Dungeons and Dragons with the character from Destiny, whose name I do not remember because I did not play Destiny.
It is that Destiny guy though. That's played, I think, by the comedian there. I think the famous guy. I can't remember. I don't know any of the names of these characters. So.
Oh, the guy that played the comedian?
Yeah, I think he's got like a famous voice talent in the game.
Morgan.
Yeah,
Dean Morgan. Okay, so a couple of comments. So here's the rework it came up with based off the critiques from last time. Working on it was a treat, especially seeing how far it went from the initial concept. Okay, the biggest obstacles I ran into was making the transition from line work and grayscale to color. A couple of people commenting on that in this image and then several other images. How would I be able to make that leap easier and faster? Of course, point out anything else. I do want to bring up the initial sketch. Here we had the two characters just in a really basic face-to-face. I felt like maybe that character on the right was just cropped off too much. We couldn't even see that other hand. We pulled back a little bit on that. And the other character was just in a very basic pose. And I thought, what if he was jumping or leaping or kind of turning sideways to shoot or something and giving a little more distance, because they look like they're so close right now that there's no way he'd possibly miss hitting him. And going to do something more interesting with the environment besides just a basic wall kind of going in the background. So I like the improvement there. I think the curved nature of some of these walls and stuff now are more interesting. But the pose, the leaping pose is almost like he's just floating sideways. I'm not really getting
it's too much. It's too much.
And this is another one where I'm looking around and I'm like, I'm not seeing the pose that you're supposed to be basing this on. And guys, do yourself a favor. I mean, it doesn't matter to me whether you go get the pose and you find a reference, but if you do, it is going to improve your art. If you need a suggestion, I think there are some scenes of Star-Lord in the Guardians of the Galaxy and Avengers movie. He has a tendency to jump sideways in a horizontal fashion and shoot his guns. You can probably find a similar pose from one of those. Okay, so we talked about a little bit of the size and improvement on that, but compositionally, what would you do to improve it? What would you think about improving the poses of the two characters? That one's to you, Tyler.
Okay, I think a lot of these are almost. Often what I see when I do these critiques on my channel is that people are zooming way too far out, right? Too far out. It separates us from the viewer, and the scene. But I think some of what I'm seeing here is almost like a trend. Like we're almost like maybe a little too close for the type of action that's getting displayed. So it's like this is almost like the shot that comes after like maybe a more setup shot. Like I'd probably zoom out just a little bit to get a little more of character A, a little, or the close-up character there on the right, just to get a little. I'd zoom out a little bit more. Like you said, like it was way too cropped initially. Like we lost like a whole arm. We didn't need to, but I'd still just pivot that out just a little bit more, and then I love the additional curvature of the room. I think that works a lot. And I think just even tilting it, slightly more, putting the right character slightly lower, going, forcing a little bit more of a Dutch angle on this one, I
Mm,
think will
mm-hmm.
actually help it out quite a bit. That way, that the curvature of the room isn't going like straight across the scene.
Yeah, I
It's
like
just
that.
enough. Subtlety is everything, and right, the best expression of movement is the simplest, is a subtle one. Um, but like one lesson I learned kind of twice in my career the hard way is with ellipses and curve things. If you freehand them, they're gonna know it's freehand, and you're gonna get a slap on the wrist. I did in school. I freehanded some satellite dishes. I don't know why I thought I was good enough to do that. And then on a job, I was doing some buildings. I did a cityscape, and I was doing domes. I love doing domes, but I don't know. Like I didn't take the time to use like a clipping mask or a selection tool, and I freehanded the domes, and I and I got yelled at for it. Same thing here. You can't freehand anything kind of architectural like that. That is that hard surfaced and
Mm-hmm.
that calculated. You like you said, you got to trace a photo outright, like just steal the perspective of an existing space, or take a half hour, learn Blender, model it out, and
Yeah.
then overlay your drawing. There's two options.
Yeah, for
But like I wouldn't
something
even
that,
recommend drawing the perspective out and calculating that like old school. Like
oh,
that would just take too much time. And I don't know the math to do that. But there's other options. There's shortcuts you can do.
yeah, you really do need to find a reference because you're exactly right. I mean, you could theoretically run all the perspective lines to figure that out, but oh my gosh, who wants to do that? For
Worth
those
it.
curves, those compound curves, oh man. And no, you're not going to be able to freehand it enough that it's really going to be acceptable. I'm on to say g- there is models already made of insides of starships and temples and all kinds of rooms that you can pull up in Blender. And just find one that's even close and you can adjust it, but as long as you have that basic frame, that basic perspective and volume that's accurate, that's going to help. You might even be able to just find a photo of
Yep.
something. I'm looking at this and I'm almost thinking of like the bridge on a starship or the bridge on the Avengers helicarrier. You probably like I can almost see Nick Fury standing there, and there's the screens around him. Uh, that might be close enough that you could just overlay that and kind of copy the perspective. So going forward, that would be one thing. Uh, Also, have to be thinking about what the specific light is. Right now, the light is general.
Yeah, the
Uh,
lighting it's too generic.
yeah, there's flat tones, and I can see what color things are, but I don't actually know where the light source is, and it's not being utilized in a way that it's showing us the forms, and the light isn't consistently hitting the forms and rendering them. So, if you had to pick where the light would be, or what you think would be a good lighting setup here, Tyler, what would you be thinking?
I would at least have one more kind of fill light like above, kind of like there is, but I there's a way you can use certain lighting effects and type lighting to hide actually a lot of the architecture
Mm-hmm.
as well. But I'd add more like kind of smoke and atmospheric effects. I'd like set dress it with a lot of special effects to hide any kind of. It'll add a lot even if you do a simple lighting. You can
Mm-hmm.
kind of flare things up a little bit. Not saying drop lens flares in everywhere, but like a hint of that here or there can do a lot. But I would definitely say with this getting you need some kind of edge or I don't know if you need to like necessarily a 3 point lighting, but if you like darkened everything and then you just had like an obtuse set like kind of off angle front light to kind of vignette the left front side of those figures,
Yeah.
you can get a lot of specularity off the materials of them, and you can get the back or the right side of both of them in the shadow and silhouette, so they'll play
Mm-hmm.
off the background.
Oh, I like that. So if you like
Yeah,
let
yeah,
more of a
that's
shadow
exactly.
here, and then you have kind of your slightly
Yep.
more atmospheric thing there. I'm not
That's
sure.
that's exactly what I poorly explained.
No, I follow exactly what you're saying. I've
It's
just
like, yeah,
wanted
you've
to
got a
try
lot
to.
of opportunities there to you want again, we want the shapes of the silhouettes of the characters. Always got to kind of read for the most part first, unless you're doing like a dragon hiding in a hole and we just see the eyes. Like we want the
Yeah,
shapes of the
yeah,
characters to really pop off the screen.
yeah. You need
And
a
then
reason why not to. Otherwise, you should be doing that.
I mean, when in doubt, you can always do the standard, 3-point lighting setup: a main key light, the rim light, and then like a softer kind of fill light. But you don't even need that fill light most of the time. But that adds so much dimension, right, to what you're doing now, and it makes the character feel really 3D and tangible.
Got reclining floaty dude here.
Heck yeah.
And
Yeah, I
maybe
think he,
some.
he just doesn't know what to do with his like off arm. It's kind of just there,
Yeah,
but like I think in that case, I just give him the double guns, give him the akimbo, and
yeah.
he can like be doing something. But yeah, his pose, I love that blue light, and then you just have like the softer light that's kind of in the background, just filling out their silhouettes, and then of course you can add all the little lighting effects and the architecture. The scale of the stairs in the back would need to be kind of downplayed. They're way too big. There,
Hmm.
yeah, a lot of little things, but again, you could hide a lot of that, and it doesn't have to be as technical as
Now,
you know.
when you're saying, and when Tyler's saying it, just kind of make sure people understand. When you say hiding stuff, we're not talking about it's like I don't want to paint feet, so I'm hiding them, which sometimes is the case. But
Not for that
because
reason.
nobody's like, oh, I love painting feet.
Balance.
But it's also to just help direct the eye. You don't want to put a lot of color and contrast and detail in areas that aren't the focal point. And so we want to obscure areas, and we have some atmosphere. It's going to lower the detail. It's going to lower the contrast in those areas, so that your eye naturally moves to looking at the more important areas. And that's something that you can utilize to your advantage.
And it's also something a lot easier to see in other people's work and harder to kind of catch even in your own.
Yeah. Yep.
It's tricky.
But that's sort of the idea, and there's a lot of options here.
It's
Like,
balancing the detail and getting the shapes just to pop. All these
So
characters are so rich with so many unique material types, and that light, that we drop on them, the speculars will change each and every material, and it will really add a lot of, physicality to the characters, and when handled right, it'll just sing.
mm-hmm.
in the chat, there was also the question on this piece, Clint, because you are very famous for all your colorful work, whether you would add any other colors or hues beside the blue in here,
Yeah, I
and
was
if so, how to do it. Yeah.
I was thinking along that line too. It would be, in this case, I probably would have an accent color. It'd almost be a discordant where everything's analogous,
I would go
except
purple.
you would do purple as your accent.
Purple pink, like the color of my light. Little hints of that here, and either from a magic effect or a gun.
Yeah.
It'll just the accent of that in enough places will. Not to answer the question for you, I'm sorry. I
No,
couldn't
no,
stop
I want to
thinking
know
it.
what you think.
Couldn't
Yeah,
stop
I
thinking
think it does need a other color, but I don't think you need to have a lot of other color. I think it does need to be limited. And I'm still thinking, like, can we not have some sort of color coming out of the barrel?
Yeah,
Or
that's what I'm saying. Like the special effects,
yeah, the glowy eyes. Maybe there's like
the
an
lights in the room,
instrument panel in the background that has some sort of similar tones on
and
it.
each of those can make a good design. Like with this, is all about the patterns and rhythms and how those work together to create a compositional flow. So you can
Hmm.
use all those little accents and lights, right? When utilized properly, they won't be distracting, and they'll create a nice little, um, just rhythm that will strike the right kind of chords in the image in the right place. And that does take a little trial and error. And I myself never get that right on the first or even fourth attempt, but like just kind of just tweaking the little blips, that you read from those color pops, though it can definitely add a lot of value to an image.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to turn off my phone. There
I love chocolate. That's what they're talking about.
we go. Yeah, Tyler. You award chocolate to your best students, don't you? I think I heard that one time.
Well, more like booze when they're around. I used to be up at a convention. I usually bring it like to the. I'm the last Luxicon I was at. We just had a table and it had booze underneath it. We were just filling people that knew who I was that was saying hi. Fill your cup up.
I was like, there's a lot of people over at Tyler's table today. Wow.
I haven't seen you at well, the last one I saw you at was I think was Spectrum in 2015 or 16. But yeah,
Yeah, it's been a
those are
while.
always fun. If I don't have a table, sometimes even when I do, I like to enjoy the party and the social side of not being a hermit that weekend.
I completely hear you. Yeah, man, it was good seeing you back there. And Spectrum Live has kind of gone away, but
Yeah, it's kind of like faded out for now.
so moving on to the next one, we have Dan Robinette. Dan's been in a
Okay,
lot of art challenges with us. He
you could
has
see.
some flavorful comments down there about the pose and camera angle. And this was the original sketch he sent in over here. And we just talked about, man, mainly it was just doing some refining. I thought about putting the back half of the character in shadow so that it felt like the character was more cornered. Because I thought if there was light behind them, that they felt more safe, like they had somewhere to go. But with her in shadow, that is a little more pressing. I think it's a her. I don't know.
Mm, yeah,
And
it could go either way, but let's go with her just for the sake of the context.
we talked about the design of the Balrog a little bit, the increasing and changing the shape of the horns to match the movie a little bit, and increasing the mouth so it has more emotion from the roar. And I think those have both come off really well. I do like the more open mouth, and the general rendering is really nice. One of the things that does catch me, let me know if this is something that catch you too, is the amount of the little cracks and how bright they are over the character. Gives me maybe not quite the right sense of texture from it. How do those hit you?
I didn't notice those, immediately first, but I would definitely. What are you thinking? Like a little more toward the orange, or they need like an orange, kind of like tints or glow to
Well,
them. But I
that
noticed with that character specifically, I think it's right above him, the smaller. I think it was like a 3D mock-up even. Like he just reads a lot better. Yeah, that one right
hmm
there where your mouse just was he he feels like a lot more three-dimensional there. Like there's something that happened, and I think the shape, the silhouette of the guy, he reads a lot clearer there, and he also feels a little more dimensional. Like the hand, because of the contrast on it, definitely feels like it's reaching out, and I like how you can see the actual horn
yeah.
and stuff on that. And then the even the feet, I just scale that back a little bit. But yeah, I think it's because like the yellow and orange, it that part of the composition's maybe a little overly monochromatic, and a lot of subtlety in that could go a long way. Like it's a very tricky thing, and I think that comp has a little more neutrals in some of the yellows and oranges in the background. I think neutralizing that background a bit more will make those yellows and the fire parts of the character kind of pop a little more. Oh, my neutral game, that's something I'm working on too. Like getting like a really sweet neutral game where you can make it so, visually dynamic and still not, full of life. Like making a neutral color full of life is an end game goal. Like it's tough. It's tough. It takes a lot of effort.
Yeah, because that's when it just really getting down to the subtleties. And
I like to rely on color too. Like just pump the brakes.
yeah, what I'm looking at that too is I had the same sensation that it was getting a little monochromatic. And if we could introduce, like I did here, just a little violet into the midtones, then you
Yeah,
actually can shift into a different set of colors a little bit.
yeah, I would have that behind the character and the pillars. I'd have it almost like a straight, just desaturate the heck out of that yellow and orange, and then once the color is desaturated, it makes a very smooth transition into another kind of color. Like you can shift it into the blues and a little bit of those
Mm-hmm.
purples, and it'll just pop. The orange character, he'll just kind of jump out quite a bit more.
Yeah, I can't remember the artist, but I was actually looking at their work for a piece that I'm working on right now, and I was trying to figure out why some of their color worked and how they're able to get some of their effect. And it looked like what they actually did is they went back with like a more gray version of what that color was, and they glazed it over it, thereby just tinting it down a little bit in saturation, which made the more saturated areas just really pop. But it
Yep.
wasn't desaturated to the point where it it felt like it was necessarily graying out, and it just allowed there to be some difference between the the different areas like this. Yeah, I'm looking at more like, can we establish some of that in a little more in the silhouette, and we're losing because the back wing and the smoke around the character is running the same color, the same value, and the same saturations as the character themselves. And I'm gonna just think about trying to push that up.
But this has definitely got like the composition's like 90% there, and
Oh yeah.
what's rendered here is extremely tight. It's just like subtle color shifts. Like underneath the while you're working on that, underneath like the blue saber, like I put up a little more of that specular highlights hitting the stone or the underneath. You could do that with like any kind of rock texture or something. Just lay it underneath where that blue light is. It'll just pick up like a little bit of extra texture down there, and that'll add a little pop to it. But this is so good. Like I love see like when you neutralize that right behind that pillar. That's what's really making the image for me. It's adding just
Mm-hmm.
enough right of that visual interest there. You just kind of want to chew on it. It's great.
Then we can really get. When we are
Mm.
getting a tangent with that pillar coming down and ending right at that belt. So
Yeah,
that's a
easy
little,
fix, right?
yeah,
But
easy
yeah,
thing to
it's a
do.
thing.
But
Like with the top of the horn of the Balrog, right? You could just have that extrude, just just extend a little out of canvas, so it's not kind of clipping
hmm,
the very top of it too. But like those are very easy tangents to kind of fix, and that's being nitpicky.
yeah, and that's where we're at,
Yeah.
Dan.
Well,
We wouldn't
on
mention
this
this on
level,
it. Yeah.
it's nitpicky stuff.
And so I think some of the smoke over here is going to be shifting slightly more to Tyler's violet that he mentioned, and just softening out a little bit towards that, so that we
Hmm.
have some slightly different color, and we're allowed a different value back there, so that that pillar isn't running to the same value as the character. And I really do like your idea of more of a specular gleam and bright tone off of the ground here.
Just because it's so close, right, to the viewer's eye, it's like that's something we definitely would catch. Yeah, and you just have to erase it, right, with the right speckled brush, and it works.
Yeah, you're just going to be getting something like that. I mean, if it's stone, you're going to be getting little flaky things, and you could also be getting some from the blades and the fire and stuff in the background as well, a little bit back there. But the brightening of the ground there some would even help the legs to stand out. Because right now the stone is super saturated, but it's not really changing in value. And if we just brought it up a little bit, we could actually bring that
Yeah,
leg out
bring it
some.
up and slightly even neutralize it because
Yeah.
it's like a little too blue.
So it's
But
just
yeah, that so good.
glazing it over with a little of that neutral tone. I'm only hitting 20-30% opacity, and just knocking it down one little peg of saturation.
Yeah, it'll harmonize everything quite a bit
Yeah.
too.
And it's just right there under the blade on those speculars that you're going to get that really pure blue reflection. The rendering, yeah, on this all looks really good. I'm buying
Fantastic.
that anatomy. It's a difficult pose and angle, but I think it's coming off really well.
Yeah.
Um, I would see about doing just a little exposure because I'm losing like that gun and some of the folds going on there, and it's really good rendering on it. So I'm going to just do exposure and then isolate that area and bring it up a little bit. And reverse that and then paint in. Oh,
Yeah, right in the center of the form there, and like on the top, that'll help it, really pop.
And we don't necessarily need to make it bright. That's not the idea. It's just we don't want anything lost to the shadow where it just disappears into kind of a monotony of darkness. Because there is a lot of light in this scene, so it's not an issue that there's not enough bounce light. I'm gonna just get a little more light into that shadow. Oh, really lovely piece, complicated piece. But Dan, you're doing really good on this one. I'm proud of the progress you made.
Again, that looks great.
Yeah. Now we're looking for those little subtle changes that can make a big difference when you add them all up.
Yeah, I love the extension of the light, in that pillar behind the character too. Like that really helps the silhouette of the figure pop in a really nice way, and it makes the pillar it makes everything feel more 3D.
Yeah. Yep. And get that volume in there. And you could even think about trying to get a little more volume out of the smoke. And I was looking at your smoke image up here. And if you want to approach it this way, it can... Oh, didn't mean to grab that. You can approach it where the smoke is actually really dark. You can grab like a really desaturated brown when you get the right layer.
You know what I noticed, the artists, that a particular group of artists that are really good at making those darks work really well, those Chinese guys. Like they have like a way or approach or technique that we're just not taught over here, and because they all kind of look the same, and you go and you look, oh, okay, you can't read the name, it's in kind of like Chinese characters traditions. It's always those guys, and they're really good at making like the darks really work. Some of them even they'll go full black and they just make it work.
I saw a video come up in my feed recommended for me that I haven't watched. It was the techniques the Chinese are using that they're not teaching us.
That sounds exactly what I need to see.
Like,
so I know they have them, but I don't know what they are.
I know they're... I know. I mean, I've looked at them and I thought, this is really harmonious. You're really balancing a lot of difficult things very well. And I'm not sure how you're going about putting that together. But the idea I'm kind of going with this one is, if the smoke is actually a really thick gray smoke, and then you have the light from the inside, and then it's, anywhere that you can see into the smoke, you kind of have that warm glow. And then anything on the top is getting more of the cool tint. And you could do that if you wanted to play around with kind of like the inner lit smoke thing. That can be a lot of fun to paint. But it is kind of tricky, and so, it's a choice. All right, moving on. Dan, good stuff. As always, upload your final, and we will take a look at it later. I'm going to close that. And Anna, you've got to say the name for this one, because I cannot pronounce that correctly.
Is it Joachim?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to try that one, Tyler?
Just try it once. Joachim. Go for it.
Wait, where is the character's name? The artist's name.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Joachim. I'm famous.
That can't be good for your throat. I can hear what you're doing.
It's
all good.
No wonder.
We're doing lectures, and I'm saying like these foreign, all these European and ancient names of places, and especially the places in India. I get a lot of flack for butchering those so hard. It's like I don't have somebody narrating or dictating these, so I'm just kind of putting my best kind of English tongue forward. It's bad though.
I just end up being like Mr. J, Mr. T. Pick that first letter and go with it. All right, a couple of comments that after last time it changed the scene and the pose of the predator. Also moved raw further back. Really enjoyed working with the grayscale, but colors is still difficult. Oh yeah, that's something else we need to talk about. I've been short on time lately because of my job, and piece is far from done. So he wants to do some study on material rendering. Always a good idea. Okay, so comments here. Let's pull up the sketch of where he was last week. Last week we were here with it, and this one was just a real lack of use of the canvas space. Everything was just kind of put right there, and we talked about, can we spread them out a little bit more, have a bit more volume to the room? Can we get the foreground predator bigger in the scene since he's a lot closer to us? So he listened to us, and he expanded the scene out, got a little more distance between them, and played around with the lighting. So I have a much better idea now what the desired lighting is of this scene. And one of the things that strikes me is that the predator's head and helmet seems really big compared to his body.
Yeah, that
And
foreshortening, that vertical foreshortening of it isn't, because the predator already has a big head, but
yeah.
this is kind of tipping to that awkwardness and not of like a flattering way, I guess.
Mm-hmm. No, there's a reason he has a big head, and it's not because they necessarily want him to have a big head, because like, literally a human's head has to fit inside of a prosthetic,
Mm-hmm.
animatic head that has to fit inside of a helmet. So he ends up having this huge head, which is why they give him these massive shoulder pads and stuff to wear, because it makes him look bigger, and that helps even out the size of his head to his body. But this is illustration, so we can actually play down the size of his head a bit and get it to match towards the body a little more. And we're talking like 20%. We're really
Yeah.
gonna scale that thing down to get it closer. Okay. Now, with position and size, I'm still thinking maybe even moving the entire predator up a bit? Or do you think that's a good level? There's just so much space over his head there. What's
Yeah,
your.
again, he's kind of cropped right at the waist, and I still think, I don't know, a lot of these are like two characters dueling, and there's a lot of ways to show that. But sometimes, there's nothing wrong with like getting two characters really like comfortably into that frame and showing that opposition. Like it always doesn't have to be like that video game camera where it's behind the back of a guy coming at another guy. That works, it always does, but it doesn't have
Mm-hmm.
to be in. Right, a lot of, I don't know, because we've seen far less of like just two characters kind of like jumping at each other, or like having one character like vertically really high up and another character kind of staggering at the ground. Where you're using perspective to really kind of tell a lot of that narrative. But
Mm-hmm.
because like in this case, I'd say that the perspective's almost too generic because it's going right through the middle about. But it's like we have that character raw. Like I'd find a way to really empower him to make him so we the viewer can feel that magic and that force coming out of him. So I'd prop him somewhere up low, and that would require a lower horizon, and then I'd have the predator either doing, I don't know what I'd have the predator doing. I'd have to like act it out. We don't necessarily need to see that this early on a Friday afternoon. Wait till I have a few in me. But then, you gotta get on the ground. You gotta like figure out what would you do if you were a predator, right? And okay, you got claws, you got some shoulder cannons. Maybe he's got his back behind a statue and he's like putting his batteries in that thing. Maybe he's charging it up. There's like a lot of things to do. And I just think for what the shot sets up and for the power level of these characters, it's too generic.
Yeah, I'm with you. One of the things I actually did like, and I don't think I said to change it or recommended changing it, but in the sketch, it looked like he was lurking in the shadows, and I thought, well, that seems really consistent with a predator. That if he was
Hmm.
going up against a really powerful prey, he would be using the shadows to his advantage. All right, we're just turning the phone off now. I have a tendency to get to this point where I get like 5 spam calls in a row.
It's one of those things. Once you get one, you get another.
Yeah, you never just get one. Okay.
I, but I guess if I was going for a more typical shot like this, yeah, I would zoom out so far that Predator for the most part's entirely in frame, and then we still see Raw way back there, but he'll be like really harnessing a lot of power, And sometimes that just requires more visual dimensional space, I guess, and which would just require a whole lot of photoshopping, I guess, but that's just I guess my take on that, because it's tough when this is the setup, we got to kind of move the pieces around, um because like he's already coming at him with like a claw attack, and he's probably a bit more range, so unless he's got to charge that skill up,
Hmm.
he Predator might be getting bagged pretty early in that fight.
Yeah. So Joaquin, that's
And
my
it's
boss.
a tough call.
Uh, this is the choice that you've got here. And this really, there isn't necessarily the right or wrong choice. It really is
That's
dependent
true.
on how much time you want to invest in this scene and what you feel like your skill level is actually capable of doing. And so, if you want to finish this scene as is, you can still have a good scene, and this can work. But we're kind of talking about if this was a scene that Tyler or I were handling, we would probably push it further with like a heightened sense of perspective. And that's kind of what I was playing with here is if Raw was like a bit more up on a dais, and then maybe
Mm,
you had a pillar. You don't want to divide it in half, but somehow there's like a pillar or something here that the predator is coming out around from, and that would give a better idea of assassinating from the shadows sort of thing. And you can do that, but it's going to require a whole new set of composition sketches, pose sketches, and all. It's a whole new ball game with that. And ultimately, I think you're going to get a better image if you can take that on and do it. But if not, if you want to just finish the image as is and try to get the most out of it, let's hit on a couple of those things. One would be let's watch the size of the predator head.
hmm
Then we kind of need to talk about the lighting, the color, and maybe a bit more about the set dressing and the design of what's going on there. So if he was going to try to get the most of as it is, and you could only do a couple of things to it, what would be a couple of things that you'd be looking at doing?
Yeah, without redrawing anything, I
Hmm.
definitely like you said, adjust the size of the head. I'd still kind of maybe like shrink it to get him a little bit more into the scene itself. I just wouldn't crop at the bottom of the elbow across the waist.
Yeah.
Um, just because that's like a double whammy there. And then I think it's just getting the structure right of the remainder of the scene kind of intact. And I'm kind of going off the previous sketches to kind of see how that would play out, because it seems like that the perspective on the stairs, that would have to. I'm trying not to get caught up on too much of those technical things, but yeah, I think once the contrast is in place, because it's like I think the big thing right now, we can see the predator getting hit with that light from Raw, but like Raw's not affected at all by the environment or the lighting that he's creating.
Hmm.
So it's like essentially, if keeping the drawing essentially the same, it just needs a lot more rendering, um, to kind of make that happen. But like set dressing stuff, I guess you could have, right. It's just designing, the statues on the side, like they would need design work. Whether there's something you're pulling directly from like Egypt, or something like Mesopotamia, or you do a little bit more inventing. But those statues, right, they'd have to get designed out, and then adding in all the surface details, like like cracks in the floor, and all the little technical stuff. But
Hmm.
that's something, right, that comes with time, if we're keeping the structure the same, and then probably defining the area behind him, which may or may not happen like if that's like a coffin or a sarcophagus, behind him. That's just something, and that's why it's tough to make these types of calls when they intended, right, to push them a lot further, because it's like, yeah, everything we say, of course, with due time, would probably get addressed to some degree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think really feeling that lighting below him, and then like even darkening the top of him so you can have the glow emit that light. It's
Yeah.
tricky. It's a
Uh,
tricky thing to balance.
this is a tricky one. I'm going to suggest you probably need to go look at some other artwork to see how they did somebody that was like in the middle of flames, if he's doing that.
I I could recommend him. You know, your work aside, which is also awesome, but like a good secondary to Clint's work would be like Greg Rutkowski's. He does a lot of character shots set up very similarly, and
Okay.
he nails the lighting every time.
Yeah, go check that out. If anybody can type that in chat for those who are not familiar with him. I recognize that name. I cannot think of the artwork
Yeah,
that
you'll
goes
see.
with it.
You'd recognize his work as soon as you saw it.
What company does he work
does,
for?
He does a lot of magic stuff too.
Does he? Okay.
Like, he painted some badass dragons.
Yeah. I'm thinking he might even switch him away from the blue. I don't know that he's going to be blue. I'm wondering if you don't just let that become more monochromatic, or at least analogous in the warm tones, because he's lit by that fire. But it has to be something like that, and then that background has to be a little bit darker so that flame can come. Because right now, the values are inherently problematic because of the pairings of having a light background against a flaming light source against a light lit fabric. And so nothing has anything to contrast against. So something has to get dark. So if we treat him more like a silhouette and you unify him as a visual unit and value, then we can let this be light, but then this has to get dark. And that might mean something like the inside area here is like black onyx stone.
That's exactly what I would do.
Yeah, and then you could have the regular stone, and that gives you a dark against a light against a dark, and you fixed your pairing set. And yeah, you would want to begin adding other colors into this brown in the background. I mean, even if you just look at your photo up here, this top right photo, yeah, you've got oranges, yellows, browns, variations. Some's a little warmer, some's a little cooler. This is really cool where like parts of the plaster have come off, right? And then you have like two different things going on there. And then the stuff in the background is more greenish because it has a different light source. I'd be just going right along and kind of using this as my guide. If you follow this one too much, you're just going to end up with a bunch of beige. And it's not going to be that interesting.
Yeah, that's a thing too with references, that you have to know which references you have for like structural elements, right? Things that are physically in your scene, and preferably a sets of reference just for lighting and the lighting of each material.
Yep. So that can be pretty good for your environment colors, but I'm also suggest a good combination is having like a photo reference that gives you kind of real world color sets, and then also if you can have an illustration reference where you see somebody who did a really good job rendering a similar lighting setup, right? And that can give you some ideas too. What about some darker darks? Yeah, in the background, you could definitely have some darker darks. If you do that, though, you need to introduce what we've talked about in several of the other ones, which is some sort of fill light. Because otherwise, you've got like a really dark character with a dark background, and you don't want to just do like a little white line around it. So you would want to introduce some other light source, maybe red. This comes to my mind. But he could have some light back here that is, kicking up some red tones, so that the rest of him can be in shadow. And I'm not necessarily even feeling that much light on him. That's a really, really bright amount of light.
He's oiled up.
Yeah. Okay, we'll wrap it on that one. Good submission. I never would have guessed that pairing, Predator versus Raw. But
I like that pairing, though. That's a good pairing.
That is a Predator movie I would go watch.
Hasn't been one of those in a while.
That last one was so bad. Oh man. Did you
All I did
see?
as a kid. Yeah, I didn't catch it yet, but I mean that was my childhood, just like watching like Predator and stuff back to back like all day long.
No, I am really fond actually of the Predators, where it's the group of soldiers that go
Mm.
taken to that other world, and they get hunted. Um, I think
Oh,
that
I did see that one. Yeah, I like that.
that
I
one
like that.
actually came together pretty well. Question says, do I like using the express keys on the tablets, or do you use the keyboard? Keyboard exclusively. I do not like the express keys.
I don't use any express keys either.
I'm trying to think of a professional that uses express keys.
Mine
Um,
ran out of batteries, right? Because you charge them, and I never recharged it. Just never went back to.
I always end up just bumping them. I turn them off. That's the first thing that I do. When I buy it, I install the software and I disable all the express keys.
And my tablet's got it's got the touch features built into, and I have to even disable those because when I'm just drawing on the screen, it will automatically like trigger these gestures and stuff, and
Yes.
make my interface go whack. And I have to kind of strip it down to its basics.
Yep. Completely with you. Um, and it's also, Tyler and I are a little more old school. Like, I've been using keyboard shortcuts for 20 years. And so I don't think about where they are. I don't have to be looking at the keyboard to run most of the shortcuts. And I'm just doing it. If you learn how to do express keys and that's how you get into digital art and you've got a, you know, muscle memory, there's nothing wrong with that. It's what works for you. All right, so this one is from Kikoi. It says, thanks again. Tried the harder version, which was hard. Yes, but it's coming out much better. We'll take a look at the sketch in a second. I keep choosing difficult perspective and it makes it more exciting. Yes, it usually does.
Hmm.
I hope I am still learning the basics at the same time. Hey, you learn basics in everything. Right?
Yeah,
You don't have to do dedicated studies to learn the basics. The background is too basic, I think. Yeah, we could talk about getting a bit more out of the background for sure. I hope you can give me some advice on the anatomy, perspective, the composition, forgive the unfinished rendering on the materials. Okay, well, we won't focus as much on the material rendering. But let's pull up
okay.
the sketch because, man, you talk about some improvement between the
Yeah,
sketch to where we are now. I had give the feedback the first time that there wasn't any sense of depth. They were all kind of just on one plane. And that would be great if it had a little more Z axis
yeah,
in the image. And that Wonder Woman's pose in her golden armor there at the top, it just didn't work with the position of the wings. I wasn't feeling the weight being moved right and stuff. So I requested that they find a more natural pose for the wings and the body. And I think this one works way better. Um,
definitely,
so
definitely.
I don't think that that is really the issue at this point. We got other things that we could look at improving. And let's start with you. Anything that hits you right off the bat with this one with Xena and Wonder Woman?
Yeah, I like the poses on, and I think that is a good pairing, as well. Um, Maybe get, since the wing right on the armor is coming out on the right side, maybe commit to that even a little more, having it go out, and then maybe have a few pieces, a few prongs coming in the bottom, because once it hits the edge of that canvas, right, it's just kind of riding its way down on the right side there. Yeah, just exactly like you
Yeah.
drew. And then maybe a little more overlap or even more separation on the other wing. So I guess most of my beefs are with the positioning of the wings. Like it, because the other one's just kind of going right into the hairline rather
Yeah,
seamless. So there must be like a slightly better option for that.
yeah, and then you've got it like riding right next to the
Mm.
lasso.
And and right now they come up because they're the same value, same color. They come up
Yeah,
very similar.
and yeah, I'm thinking you almost have to change it so that it's doing more of this. It's like decidedly behind her head, and it has a decidedly different angle than the
Yeah, just
lasso,
like
or we
just a
need to
different one.
change the lasso. Hmm. That's one of those that you have to play around for a bit and try to move one here and balance it against something else there. It does make me think a little bit of Adam Hughes. I mean, you're familiar with Adam Hughes, right? Comic
Mm,
artist.
yeah.
But he did, for years, he was the main cover artist for the Wonder Woman series. And he got to the point he was doing a little more abstract, kind of graphical use of the lasso. It wasn't as literal as everything else. And if you want to follow that, you could even have the lasso doing like, you know, some beautiful kind of crazy curve, right? Because it's magical and you can kind of do whatever you want with it.
Yep.
And so you could get it like doing this flippy thing in the air, then it wouldn't interfere with the angles of the wing if you wanted to change the wing around. I think one of the things that's catching me with the wing is that the top of it is like really folded over, and that's not the same angle as we're getting on the other wing. So I'm thinking that we probably see the bottom of it, the inside of it, let's say, until you get further here, and then maybe just at the last you actually get
Mm,
the
I
top,
like that. I like that, Clint. Sold.
and then it's staying more like this for the rest of the time. Yeah, you kind of have to think about it for a minute and try to find. Oh,
I
this.
probably have done so few like winged characters and creatures in my time. It's and for that like they're insanely tricky to do. You have to really kind of think about the logistics of it.
Uh, yeah, I have had to do wings multiple times over just the commissions that I've got, and so.
You're a pro now. You're pro with this. That unicorn, the flying Pegasus one you did, the cover there, like wow, that worked well.
That one was a good education, man. I got to learn quite a bit. Really brushed up on my horse anatomy in my.
You got to deal with horses and wings, like everyone's favorite bundle.
Yes. Okay, so let's say that we do that. I think that handles some
Yeah,
of the
I
compositionally
love that.
issues.
That's a great flow.
Now I'm getting into like colors, lighting, rendering.
Yep. And then background.
Yes. Yeah. I'm prone to think about. And one of the first things I want to do is like establish where the light source is, so that I can find what my shadow pattern is, where my direct light is coming from, and then that's going to affect kind of where the color is. Because right now everything is getting sort of washed out, and I mean I want to come in here and just punch up a lot of color in the background.
Yeah, I'd punch it. I'd punch it all up for sure. Like even for like a brighter kind of day, that without any direct light, you could still get some pretty vibrant, um, like ambient, indirect sort of lighting. And then, what you do with the sky patterns and everything else like that. I mean, that can really play into the design as a composition. But yeah, I'd probably have to if you take like the whole image and you adjust the levels, add a little bit of saturation, then that'll give you a little more wiggle room, right? You can get a little lighter, a
Yeah.
little darker in the areas that need. Yeah, like exactly.
So you can pick a lot of different colors for this background. I'm just kind of
And they'll
going.
all work because the
Yeah.
composition is already working at this level without it.
Hmm. Yeah. The new positioning of this works really well, and let's turn that off for a second. So I'm looking at your reference over here of this archer. I think this is probably Legend of the Cryptids. I'm just guessing. And a similar lighting to like that generally works for a flying character where you can have that light coming in over their shoulder.
Yeah,
And
I would definitely do that, but without that what is it like that as dramatic type of sunset lighting. Like you can still do
yeah,
that with this type of lighting. Like you just find a good angle for those clouds. You have the clouds kind of parting, where you want the character. But basically having a little bit of that light filter right over the silhouette, of that character. And that it could look, fantastic. Very tricky to kind of to pull off. I think the last Jason Chan did a piece for did a piece for Wizards of the Coast maybe like 7 or 8 years ago. He had a character riding a Pegasus or a swan, and I remember it's very similar lighting, but it just I had never seen anybody kind of do that type of like lighting style for mostly a sky shot. If Kiko, if you wanted to add something in the background, if you put like slightly, out of focus, like trees, like not like full trees, but like maybe like some bare trees, like
Mm,
they were just splintered
yeah.
or something, like just a little, so they're not like these giant, sharp, creeping shapes coming out of the bottom, but like just something slightly uh, there, just to show like they've been in battle. These trees are all like kind of singed and damaged. Like, they could add a little context without overdoing it.
Yeah, just to give the indication of some blasted terrain in the background. Even if you wanted some dust or something kicked up from
Yeah,
their fight, sort of skewering bits of it, that would work. And it
yeah.
would keep it from feeling quite so floaty.
Hmm.
Yeah. You could run a linear dodge and really get some sheen off of this gold. Like she's got really lovely reference over there.
Yeah,
She no, Kiko, yeah, it's a she, I
gold,
think.
gold,
Um,
so tough.
in direct sunlight, that gold is going to just be white. I mean, it's just
Yep,
gonna,
it's gonna blow out.
yeah. So you're
And
gonna
then
get,
that way, if you go darker, you can really make the areas where it's overexposed like that really pop.
yeah, and the same thing with Xena here. You're gonna have this higher sense of contrast between the light and shadow coming across on her. And I'm just doing it obviously super fast and super rough, but you kind of follow that idea
Hmm.
of what's going on there.
Yeah, you just get those nice two, fairly distinct families of light and shadow, and that'll make the forms just pop,
Yeah.
especially with all the effects.
Uh, I would be thinking just to use a little more of your anime clouds, like you're kind of curving the clouds in this sort
Yep,
of,
and keep them softer.
yeah, sort of thing going on where they're all doing that sort of pattern. And it's just leading you into the scene from both sides. And we're talking about like wispy guys, little wispy guys in the background. Nothing crazy there. Just happy little clouds.
So the artist has also a little question to you, Quint, whether she needs some more particles or stuff in the background just to fill the canvas a little bit more, because by now there is not much yet. So what do you think on that?
Particles. I'm not really seeing the need for particles. I think if you just tossed in some of those skeleton trees, a little dust kicked up around the base of them, had some clouds there in the background, I feel like that would probably
That's
be
plenty.
adequate. Yeah.
That's plenty.
And just a really good, clear light and shadow pattern across everything. That's going to make it more dynamic. And oh, I guess you don't actually shadow the lasso because it is a actual light source. So anyway,
Yeah. She's also a little bit insecure about the anatomy of the arm holding the disc. So
hmm
it's really strong for shortening. So what do you think? Is it?
well, Tyler told me earlier that he thinks it just looks terrible. Now I'm not that harsh,
Throw me under the bus.
so
Yeah, he said that about all the pieces. Was like, what the heck are you doing here?
yeah.
What did you throw
What
me in front of
kindergarten
this
is
week?
this?
Clean up the dirty work.
Uh, yeah. I mean, it does look a little janky. Um, I don't know. I don't see a Xena reference for her attire. One of the things that gets me with it is that this forearm guard, the end
Yeah,
of
it's
it
that
seems
part.
too flat. Like I want to see it round more. Is that kind of what you were picking up on too?
it's that part of it. I wouldn't out of the skill set to improve the hand anymore. I think that works for me, but it's somewhere like that area above the hand, where it connects to like the bicep area. Yeah, that's a very tricky foreshortening ankle.
Like if you ran the
Yeah,
arm underneath there, see that doesn't align with the hand back there.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so I think we have to have that straightening off more on the top. And
yeah.
then it's almost a full just half moon circle there. And it's probably going to get bigger. I had to draw somebody similar for shortening last year. And I remember having kind of a heck of a time with it. I had to go back and forth several times before I found something that felt right. This is one that's really not that hard to get a reference for, though. I mean, you can just stand in front of a mirror and put your
Yeah,
hand out.
you'd have to because that's such a specific angle. It's hard to kind of fake.
Yeah. And you
Gotta
got this.
watch a whole bunch of Ethan Becker videos. Just get the shape right. Screw the anatomy.
Yeah, yeah. If you can get a good reference, then all you need is the shape. That's true. Um, and keep in mind that you've got, in this case, if you're looking at my arm, this is flat, but when it hits the elbow is more vertical, and then when it gets to the wrist flattens out again. So it goes from this orientation to this orientation back to this orientation. And if you're building it up from the basic forms, if you get that correct, then that can help you get it correct, feeling a lot more anatomically right. Yeah. But just my quick fix, I mean, if I saw that, I'd probably accept it. I wouldn't. It wouldn't really catch me off very much.
I wouldn't lose sleep over it.
Yeah, that wouldn't be my biggest concern there. I do think her face needs more work. She's running more Asian to me, and that's more of an Asian sort of profile. And I don't think you're getting the curvature of like how the
It's the
cheek.
nose, right? It's the yeah. It's a tricky angle.
Because we should be seeing the nose turned over more. It's more like this is coming down here, and then the nostril has to be rounding down there. You can probably go out to something like Sketchfab or bring up a 3D model and rotate it to that angle, and it won't look like Lucy Lawless, the actress, but it's going to give you the proper overlapping, and then you can kind of adjust the features a little bit to make it look a bit more like her. Yeah, I was looking at the chest there, the breastplate area.
It's very flat right now. Not like shape wise, but form wise, right? You definitely would need like some shadowing and just to show the roundness of that. Like, what do you think about the positioning now? Like anatomically, I guess, but it's reading as a flat shape for me.
Yeah, and I was trying to look at her design. She's got a bit of the Wonder Woman thing that there's kind of like each cup is fairly well defined, and then she has the middle section
Hmm.
there. And I'm not really getting that here. I think the angle's pretty good there. Uh, this is getting just a little complicated. I'm not sure. That thing looked like the same design, but you really want to be watching where your center is. Have your center line. Then you can set the breasts off to either side of that. It looks like this one could probably change up there, and then that one's going to overlap a little bit from this angle. Again, you want to work in the basic forms first. I say then the outside of the breast is going to merge into the fold there that connects to the arm. But I feel like maybe those lines are too high. Yeah, she doesn't have enough chest area above. I'll drop them down further first.
Yeah, what an angle. Woo.
Yeah, there we go. I think that's going to be a little closer. Yeah, because we have to have enough room below the collarbone to where the breast would actually start, and then coming down, because we have a lot of torso area here.
Yeah, there's plenty of torso.
And we've got to have the room from where the arm connects there, and then it comes down and runs into the fold on the side. And then you're going to have some overlapping because the angle, you're going to mainly see the left, the right breast, and then a little bit on that other side. And then you would have to map your armor to match those shapes. And so I think you're going to really see more of the really tight V right there in between them. And if you can get that right, that's probably going to give you a better sense of the pose. But yeah, it depends how much she's turning her chest back, because her lower body is turned towards Wonder Woman, but her arm is extended back. So that would be like my offhand guess, but I would probably go try to find something a little more accurate to base that on. All right, gotta keep moving. Going a little bit
Heads
slower.
up, I got about 15 minutes. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay. Sorry we're taking a little longer.
That's fine.
This one is by Losa Appa. Said, couldn't find any good references for the flying Pegasus. Yeah, I've looked. I also did not find any good references. So he just winged it. Yeah, okay. Speaking of wings, they were quite flat. Any advice on those? Also, oh yeah, can we talk about this? A couple of people brought this up. Grayscale the color. Tyler, can you give them some ideas about grayscale the color, how to make that work, or is that something they even need to be doing?
I've seen like a few guys out there online and like YouTube, be able to pull that off, delicately. I think it is kind of more like you have to kind of treat it more of like there's two ways, okay, you can approach it, right? One is that it is just an underpainting, and it will always be an underpainting, right? You start overlaying and you set it up, kind of like a traditional canvas. You're just going to be opaquely painting over it and all the details from there, and you're just using
Yeah.
it for structure. The other way is that you kind of take it more of like a surgical approach, and you go back into each little piece, each little section, if you kept the layers, and you colorize them, and you can kind of build it up and use the shapes of the layers to kind of expedite the process of just painting in the bigger things. I think you go one or the other. But I think the problem for most people is they'll go with the option one, right? Where they'll treat it as an underpainting, but then they'll never put in the work or the time
Yeah.
to really take it past the color rough kind of stage of a value to color. And I was experimenting with this last month. I did that fish painting I think you saw, right? I colorized the value because I did a full value version of it, and I was like, I could just tighten this up and go from here, but I made the decision. You know what? It was in a Monday night hangout actually. I was like, I'm going to start this from scratch, and I'm really happy I did. I got my layers back, and I was able to really kind of precisely adjust all the subtleties of the colors. And I'm doing that too I'm doing a very it's very neutral heavy scene. So colorizing it would actually be easier because it's like a spooky snow scene in the winter, right? Loads of whites, loads of neutrals. It'd be very easy to colorize, but I spent 20 minutes trying to colorize it right, using all kinds of tricks, gradient maps, selective masks, all kinds of things. I was like, I still was not happy with it. So I ended up starting it over anyway in color, but I, it's a very tricky thing. And I think only by doing, different processes where you do color a black and white version of something enough to say like, okay, I either like this or I don't, then you can go forward. But I think either way, like what I tend to do, and I think it's similar to what you do, is I put enough work into the value side so I understand what I at least need to solve for the image, and then that only becomes like a separate reference itself, and then I
Yes.
just kind of
Yes.
build it up from scratch in color.
Yeah, there are some cases where you can get away with not really having to do any painting, or minimal painting after you put color over it, but that's rarely the case. And you have to set it up very intentionally with the values so that you don't need to. Now, that That happens when there is very little contrast in the scene.
Mm.
If everything sits in the midtones and it's like a very um, low contrast, no direct light sort of situation, which you can get away with in a character design image, and which it's not really about the scene. It's, you can just do kind of a flat, soft lighting. Then you can do that, and you can then add the colors. Why? Because are the most colors don't move very much without needing to change hue. So if you make a color in shadow, you have to change the hue either to be more less saturated or shift in hue. If you add a light onto it, you have to make it more saturated and you have to shift it in hue. But if everything is already having to stay in the midtones, then everything just remains the color that it is. And I was looking at an MTG image where it was black and white to color and they did minimal painting over it. And it was a situation where everyone was backlit, so everyone was under just this basic soft backlit shadow. They were all in shadow, which means that there is no direct light on them, there is no high contrast, and everything's color is basically its base color. And he was able to just black and white, add a color overlay, a couple little spots to clean things up, and it was done. But that's the exception. Usually, you have to do is exactly what you were talking about, Tyler, which is it serves as just one stage of the painting process, and then you actually go back and freaking paint the whole thing.
The guy that does it pretty well, I was thinking of online, he's got a YouTube channel with a load of time lapses, and he does kind of more value to color more than he does it better than a lot of people I see. But his name's Jordan Grimmer,
Hmm.
and he tends to almost have like every compositional element and every kind of brushstroke on separate layers. And I saw his layer palette in his video. He must have like 100 something layers, and I mean, more than enough to give me anxiety. But he would go through and kind of like, he'd lock the pixels and then paint whatever color that, he'd go through one by one. And that I kind of have a hybrid of that where I just have a few, which I go over in shameless plug. But the last video, your questions answered on my fish painting, where I break down the process of that. I did something similar, where I just simplified it into like, okay, foreground, background, two characters. The rest of it, it's just isolated into 5 or 6 pieces that I have to worry about manually painting. Because the lighting effects, like when you start having direct lights with multiple colors or multiple directions, and the type of light, whether it's diffused or direct, that can be a lot to kind of colorize into. It's like right when you colorize or you see a black and white photo or film colorized, it kind of always has that look to it. That's like, yeah, we know what you did here, which it works in better in some places more than others.
Yep. I did want to ask you, for the sake of the viewers, if they haven't checked out any of your material, where would be a good place to start? If there was a particularly good video, where would they start on the channel? And
my latest YouTube ones, because I as I get heck from my community managers, Tim, about like I don't have these I don't have really well playlists. I have to get on that. But I think the last 3 or 4 months of videos that I put up, kind of I've been taking time. One of my promises this year was I wanted to go through, stop just like rushing videos out, on a timeline. Like, okay, I'm just going to rush a video out every week. I'm trying to take my time to make more edited and meaningful, curated content. So I'm more personally proud of like later videos that I put out than especially stuff even a couple of years ago. Like it's just you don't want to listen to that.
I didn't know what I was talking about back then.
Yeah, well, yeah, I just kind of just got in front of a mic, and and then I don't shut up. And it's just like I actually kind of write out what I'm going to say, and it lets me just articulate an idea or a point far easier and more directly. Because as I got a lot of heck one time for having like a 20-second intro. Someone's like, "That's way too long," and I was like, "Oh, like the attention." Today's audience is shrinking, so I'm trying to like cut down time length and just get things direct to the point. It's like you don't want to have someone have a 20-second intro there for this free education. So it's a lot. I like this image. I mean, that horse. I mean, without, I don't know if how direct of a reference there is on that, but I mean that looks great to me as someone that does not know horse anatomy. I'm convinced.
Yeah, it does have a good flow to it. I would
My
accept it.
Yeah, my only thing with this image, and maybe that was an intentional statement, is that there's very like equal emphasis on the Pegasus as well as this monster, right? They kind of
Hmm.
there's almost like a line right down the center, and they both take about the same amount of mass in the image itself. So it's like, is that intentionally done to show these are two, very different scaled characters, but they're still a very equal power?
Hmm.
Or would it be better to show one size in physical stature is lends itself to the power, where this is smaller. It's like kind of like a glass cannon, right? Like with the Pegasus here. So that would be some questions that I would dig in with the design choices of this particular picture.
Oh yeah, the sketch. Let me turn that on over there.
Okay.
Had a
Oh,
lot of the
that
same
is
beats to it, but I had talked
yeah.
about what if we just drop the camera angle down
Yeah,
and to where we're lower to the ground. I thought that that might be
I think that
more
works.
interesting.
I guess
Just
the only thing I personally would do with that is actually just shrink the Pegasus character down, just to kind of fit it in that space to really show that this creature in the background is just so much bigger. And then that way it'll create, a dominant and sub-dominant relationship between the scale of them, at least visually speaking.
mm-hmm. Yeah, let's try
But
that.
I
I
mean,
can scale that down
that's
just a
yeah,
minute.
that's like it's an apples or not one way is right or the other, because you can always achieve this very look, and based off perspective and how you want to shoot a shot. But I would definitely like camera like, okay, this is a little powerful character and this is a big character, and
Now, it's just if you take it down a little bit.
that horse does have a great butt. It must work out.
Yeah,
That's what they're talking about in the chat.
I think that's good. What I was kind of just
Yeah,
messing
like
around with the
that's all.
rest of it
That's
is.
really all it takes. It's just like just a little emphasis that in design. As I talk about at the school a lot. Most of the bigger problems that come with designs is just a lack of emphasis. Like
Hmm.
just it's like why people usually avoid the 50-50 ratio, because not
Yeah.
one thing is emphasized over the other, which kind of inadvertently leads to a very indirect statement. So like let's just it's clarifying. It's making a point clear is what it does.
I'm wondering about the wings folding back like that, though. It
Yeah,
just.
particularly to the left wing, it definitely kind of feels like a little. I have to channel my inner Pegasus to really kind of consider how that would look. But yeah, especially when you mention it, that definitely draws
Well,
you know my attention in a way I'd consider.
I. You don't usually see the wing folding where the the structure side of the wing is on the underside and it's folding upwards. I
Hmm.
don't know that that's even anatomically possible. Um, I
Yeah, like it should, like you said, kind of go sort of like
because
the opposite direction.
yeah, it's like an arm. I mean, essentially it's like a hand coming out from there, and I'm expecting it's going to be like doing this, and then it's going to be coming off that
I,
direction.
I like I like that.
And I think that might be more. You got
That's
more.
also a very nice shape you got there too. Like it works for the action of the character.
It's that, or he just went and went up, in which case the wing is like down here, and he's got a big glide going on with the wings below him. Um, but I think overhead probably works better.
Mm. Yeah, I definitely like the overhead as well.
Yeah, it'd be great if he could find. I'm gonna say go look for a swan that's taking up out of the water, and And maybe that's what you based it on, but I'm just feeling a little. That doesn't seem right. I just expect it to twist a different way. I do have to commend some of the designs and the shapes here. That you went with the non-obvious shape up for some of these mouths, and you allowed them to form these kind of diamond shapes, and then allowing it to continue up this sort of tear, sort of zipper up the creature. Those are some really good choices, and I can see
You can put like little highlights on those teeth,
Yeah.
even like little, and then deepen the contrast in the mouths. Like that'll make that thing. Oh, you'd really get to appreciate those details even more.
Yeah, I like that idea. Get some, or even if you had like, I'm almost seeing like blood or gore or something kind of feeding out of it. If you really want to just make.
I don't think I've ever seen that creature before. I'm not sure what it's from, but it's definitely something insanely cool.
Yeah, does anybody in the chat remember what this
What's
was?
the
I
name?
thought it was like a Cthulhu thing.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe we can squeeze one more in with Tyler here before we go. Paul is up next.
Man, I gotta
you got-
bounce now. I hate
Okay,
to, I
no,
hate to leave you like this. This has been so much fun. Thank you. And you're gonna come on my channel sometime now because you owe me. You're coming
no,
on.
absolutely, happy to. You need to let me know when it works out for you and
will.
what your guys would be most interested in getting some feedback or
Well,
whatever we're
You're
doing.
always in the back of my mind for that stuff, so we'll work it out. We attempted some kind of crossover thing even like a year or two ago, and then we both got sidetracked and stuff. So we'll make it happen. But thank you so much. This is a lot of fun, guys. Everyone have a great weekend.
Hey, you too. Thanks for coming on. Good to have you.
Take care, everybody. Later.
All right, get you, Tyler.
Bye, Tyler.
All right, Anna, you're up then.
Wow, I did not prepare, to be honest.
So I will give some feedback first, and then you can whatever your casual
Yeah.
observations are. But man, it was really good to have Tyler on.
Yeah, it was so nice. It was so good.
Cool
He has
guy.
really nice insights, and yeah, really cool to have two pros. I'm a little bit sorry for the last two people. Probably also wanted some comments from Tyler, but yeah, see it like a lottery. So
Well, I
maybe
was
next
just talking
time.
too long, and I used up too
Yeah.
much of his time.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, so we're looking at Paul's image. Says, so disappointed I could not finish the youngest was sick. Sorry about that, man. But you did what you needed to do. You have to take care of the little one first. Anyway, this is what I would have fixed. Would have went with the perspective of the angel's head. Okay. The alien's arm to follow the direction of its spine. Okay, because it's mimicking the similar angle. Okay. And the tail loop around the angel's leg. I do like the idea of the tail reaching up here to like loop the leg, and personally I would do it something like that, where it's not fully grasped yet. It was still, reaching for it. Something in that line. Let's take that out. More Skype cam. Oh, I don't think Anna wants to be on Skype.
I can turn on the cam. I don't know.
I
but
can just.
There's
no,
nothing to see, guys.
No, I mean just turn that off, and that way we won't have a black square down there. Okay.
Don't know whether you can see me now, but
Oh,
there's
I can.
nothing much to say. Do I look good?
Oh,
Probably
there she
completely
is.
greasy face because it's super hot here. I have not makeup on, so deal with that, guys.
We'll just make sure the image is really little so they can't make out details.
Yeah, make it so super small. So. Can you maybe lessen the contrast and put more brightness in it so it gets such a smooth look?
I'll put the soft focus filter on it.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, I'm digging the pose of the alien. I think it's got a lot of good curves going on. It's sort of anatomy where it's always like kind of curled up. That's coming across really well. The silhouette is reading, even without any details of lighting. You can tell that's alien. The xenomorph just from the silhouette. The angel feels better. That pose, having the other leg being the one up in the air, feels more natural. You're going with the light armor. That could be really difficult, is with the silver armor in a really lit area. Anna knows a little bit about doing well lit silver armor right now. So if you want some pointers, she could probably help you out. And
Totally. I'm struggling with it. This is why I'm pro now on this topic and can help you with it. Logic.
one of the things that is getting me though, and maybe you just haven't clarified it in the painting yet, and it is something that needs to be clarified, is there is like no edge between the wings and the light sort of coming out behind the character. So I don't know. Like, I get that these are wings, but then it feels like it just turns into light rays. And I don't know, like, where the end of the wing is. Should we be seeing a proper, oh, switch tools. Should we be seeing a proper, end to where the wings are? Because it doesn't seem good that the wings would actually be extending beyond the feet. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. So we need something like that, and then indicate that there is maybe light rays coming out from behind it or from it or whatever the case may be. But we do need that sort of distinction between those two. If we're going with an angelic character, you may even think about adding a little more fabric elements, some sort of like tabard cloth coming down, or it might even have like fabric sleeves or some sort of sash or something, and maybe not full metal. Yeah. And the head here is the one thing that I would really be most interested in changing on the alien, because it feels like it's really at a flat view to us and not angled. I feel like this one is even slightly more angled, where its head is facing more towards like the foot than it is, towards the character. And so I was like, can we get this and switch it so that angle is more like that? Right, and so you have the end more here, and then you have the mouth kind of down there. So from kind of a wider standpoint, with you looking at it more for the first time, does anything strike you, even if you don't have a solution of like, that doesn't seem right? I'm not getting any audio. Did I accidentally mute you, or you mute yourself?
No, I muted myself.
Okay.
Sorry. Because I also got someone in the house, so I wasn't sure whether he's
Okay.
saying something. It is a bit tricky for me because I think what is so nice in the sketch and the top sketch, like the very, very first one, the general one, is that nice dynamic between her being curved like this and the alien being curved on the other,
Mm-hmm.
with this tail swooping around. And it would give, with the sword pointing down, kind of an 8, an infinity kind of composition, with our eye being led around and round and round in the piece. And this got a little bit lost. We have now a diagonal because the sword is aligning with the body. So it's like a line, and then the nice curve of the alien. I was just thinking about whether we can bring back, without having to change everything, but bring back a little bit more of that nice flow from one to the other. I think we cannot get the 8 shape back, but maybe if we change the wings like you sketched before, so that they are maybe angled or folded the way that it leads back to the alien, you could have a better flow. Because by now I just feel like the alien having a nice flow, and she's like stiff, and it's suddenly going up. Well, my dog is just coming back from his walkies, so he's panting. Yeah, this is what kind of thrown me off a little bit. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I do like that curve of some of the earlier designs, and when the pose got adjusted there, well, that pose didn't seem right. We did lose a lot of the curvature that sort of went against that curvature. I don't know that we can get a lot more out of that. We can try playing with it for a moment. I'm almost thinking if like if the back is allowed to arch more there, you have but you're twisting at the same time, so you're really not going to be able to arch your back a lot if your lower body is also twisting. I feel like that foot is probably going to be flatter to us. I don't think you're going to be picking your heel up, your toe up sharply. That angle. Yeah, it's that, or you'd have to find it a completely different pose. But yeah, if you could adjust it and get more of that curve out of it, that would probably be better. Unless you did something like a flowing cloth sort of thing, kind of coming off of the character and letting that serve as sort of the compositional element, and it's working as a graphical tool. It's not necessarily, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but we're just talking about kind of a graphical thing that could come across there and help sort of tie these curves together, since the pose isn't carrying enough at this stage. With the pose, oh yeah, Hobbit, you're mentioning this. I was thinking about that too. Is like the general pose and silhouette of the character is good, but as you go about rendering it, we do need to come in here and add in those shiny little specular details that help kind of tell that form. And most of it can stay pretty black, but we do need to indicate some of those xenomorph kind of biomechanical details. And that can be that you have a sort of edge reflection on it, on the edge, and it's not real bright, but you probably have the brighter highlight towards the middle. That is like the part that's rounding out towards the camera. I do like that underlight though. I think that's working pretty good. But we can have that like on the cross as well. And the cross isn't reading very well at this point. So we don't have to go real bright with it. I think if we just shifted it more towards that red, ooh, there's a fly on me, then that would still show up without having to go real bright. And it could just contrast against those cooler tones there in the background. And that's a nice combination there. Yeah, this is just a stream about a puppy now, and that's okay. No.
Sorry, he needed a hug. Well, Shiba Inu are basically like cats, and you own a cat, so you know how it is. You cannot ignore them.
No, they let you know when they need some attention.
Yep.
got that. We do need to separate that arm out a little bit. And whether you're doing light from one side or the other, and I'm almost thinking like if there's a little glow behind it or something just to help pop that out some. And a little glow kind of coming back there as well. That's a nice combination with that. No, this is progressing well. I think you're doing good. Like you said, you just were hit with something that took away some of your rendering time. But just move forwards with it. The direction is a good direction. If it was me, I probably would add some sort of fabric there just to help get the attention back in and make it a much clearer direction back to the other character. Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff. Yep. Next up is Tim. Last one we're going to be taking a look as Tim. Sorry.
Stop. Did you have seen the one from Michael? Did you review it? Not yet, I guess.
No,
was
because well,
Posted
if it
on
was,
Discord,
I didn't look on Discord.
because one said he had to submit it via Discord.
Well, that's not a way that you can actually submit it. I can go look it up, but
I'm looking already,
Yeah.
but I also can't find it.
but yeah, I mean, just
There it
even
is,
even
yeah.
if it's not done, just send it in. No, it's better just to send it in than have to scramble and try to go find the piece by some other means. There's a deadline for a reason.
Well, he wrote like 3 minutes before the deadline ended that he tried, but Dropbox didn't take it, and so he posted it like 2 minutes after it on Discord. So I'd not be too harsh on him. But I'm the bad cop, so you must decide you're the good cop.
Oh no, what do you? Okay.
But yeah, you're right. Usually these links work if you have the right one. If you click the right one, there are 2 links always in the files, one for the sketch, one for the finals. Make sure you took the right one. Make sure not to post it like 5 before it is due date. Just
Yeah,
just-
I'm gonna say, just remind people that there's probably a couple minute variation between what your clock says and what my computer says. And so there could easily be a 5 minute difference between our two clocks. So if we're talking about uploading the last minute, don't actually go for the last minute, because my last minute and your last minute might not be the same. Like, we're talking, like, upload it at 30 minutes beforehand. You're probably not going to have any problem. Also, you're going to be able to get a hold of me 30 minutes beforehand. More
there's
likely.
also not so much you can improve or do in the last 30 minutes.
That's a good
It's
point.
not like it's gonna change the whole critique or anything.
Yeah.
You often feel like that if you're like, oh, if I have 10 more minutes and then I'm gonna change this and that, but often the critique doesn't go into these tiny details and stuff, so don't be bothered with that. So just post it and finish it off later. It's never bad for you to post it then.
Yeah, somebody told me that once before, which is, you get down towards the end of an image, and each minute that you put in accomplishes successfully less of the image. So the first hour that you put into an image changes the image a lot. But the last hour usually actually changes the image very little. And so with this one, and what I'm looking at is the whole thing is just quite grayed out right now. And I'm curious about just trying to punch that up a little bit. So I did add a vibrant saturation, give it a little more color. And I'm more concerned with it being on the Kali character. And let's play with the lighting. I think the composition's working pretty well. This is one where we might pull out just a little bit. Just give it a little bit more room. It looks like in your concepts you actually have more room over there. So I would probably pull out maybe 10% and give a more little space around her. And then we need to look at the value scheme right now because a lot of it's sort of running together. And I actually like a lot of the values here. What do you think about this one down here, Anna? I think the values and the sense of volume and stuff is working pretty well in that reference. And that we
Yeah.
can,
So,
because those shapes are showing up a lot better.
yeah. So the foreground, the creature can be much darker, and because there's super crazy detail there, which is great. It's great rendering and all that. But I feel like this is not our focal point. She is our focal point. And if you have a creature that close the camera and push it to that high detail and contrast, then it becomes a focal point. But I don't think that the back of this creature is a focal point. Maybe its head, but not the back or the body and the arms. So I do it dark, make it a layer with multiply something, make it darker, and get a little bit tuning down the details a bit so that we're not too much distracted from what is important in this. And if it was about just the creature and its anatomic or features or stuff like that, then I'd say, okay, yeah, render it like that. But this is a fight between these two. It's not about its back or something. So put detail there where you need it. And I think you don't need it so much in the lower left corner of the painting. And also the midground and especially the values behind her can get much brighter. You can be much more exaggerated to have more contrast, and contrast means also more dynamic appearance of the painting, and means also more readability because you will make her silhouette stand out even more. Yeah.
Yeah, those are good observations, Anna. Tim, I hope you're paying note to that. Those are all right. We do need to punch up that value there in the background. I don't know what this skirt thing is. I think you're trying to make it black. I'm going to just make it more black. And we can get some more of that gold tone out of her. She is a deity of some kind. I forget exactly the position that Kali holds. But I assume that she has really nice sparkly gold. And we can get a good sheen off of some of this gold. And it might not necessarily be completely accurate to be this warm and that clear, but it also sort of runs into the, I'm a deity and my bling is not affected by the environment. Gives a good punch to some of the contrast there where the metal is very shiny and everything else is very matte. And then let's grab our I love the linear dodge layer. We'll do linear dodge, and it looks like you actually have a somewhat warm light there, so we'll do that. And look at this, when we add that nice bright backlight. I love it. I love this, one of my favorite things, just having nice bright light. And then you're going to have the backlit. Even the black hair that's backlit will become white on the edges. So we can add that around. She's underlit there. And we're going to add some just to the general area around her. I don't think you need a lot of color out of it. It sort of already has its own color scheme. It's very cool based. And so this is just a slightly warm, slightly warmer, just kind of bringing it out some. Adding a little atmospherics down there. create a sense of depth. No, overall, the render in this scene is quite good. The anatomy looks good. The xenomorph anatomy looks good. The posing looks good. The proportions, all that stuff. So you're doing a lot of good work with all of those. And so now we're just, how do we get all those elements in a stew and make a good balanced flavor out of them? And I want those heads to show up more over there. I'll probably make those blades dark. I'll come back and make those blades dark, but have more of that light coming out from behind her. And then some of the arms and the further back could be getting some of the spill light from it. Oh, my pad. I think it's my pad's getting old and sometimes it forgets. Or I can't tell when I'm not pressing down on it. So we got that. And then in order to make it more consistent, we want to follow what you have down here, which is the light that's back behind her is also affecting them. So they're picking up some of the sheen light, especially in those white teeth. Now, they have the white teeth that are also very wet. The mucus or whatever that the aliens' saliva have. Now, this black can actually highlight up really bright because it is wet. A shiny black thing that is having a liquid surface to it can get very shiny. Letting those really punch up. You know, you can watch some of the movies and see how you get really nice sheens off of some of the alien anatomy. Not everything needs a highlight, but you do need to go around and pull out some of the major forms. And things like here at the edge, even though you maybe not get one or there'd be cast shadows on it, you do want to pull out a highlights on those fingers so that they can stand out. Okay, so say that we got that, and then we want to move to the sword. Either that sword blade probably needs to be white, or it probably needs to be very dark in order just to have the value transition there. That's feeling pretty good. Now let's see about adding in a... I'm going to do hard light at a lower opacity and get a little atmosphere between the two of them. Oh, need something lighter. A little more opacity. There we go. Maybe a little less saturation. In between those two. Maybe like the bottom around there, around all the areas around the body, you kind of getting the little more spill light. And get much more of the goddess sort of lighting going on there. So that's sort of difference we're looking at. The drawing is good. The way everything's been executed, the way it's been rendered, all the anatomy, then it's about getting that and really putting a lighting on it that brings out that emotion, brings out the feeling of it. Yeah. And then your dodge, you could just step up, and then you could probably hit some of this with a little white highlight on some of the gold to just get the sheen. You're probably going to catch it more on the edges. Even on the shadowed stuff, you might catch it a little bit on the edges. And so she's got like the glints of light from her gold, and then they've got the glints off of their hard surfaces. And so back here we've got to have more of the cool light, and you kind of getting some of the reflection sort of thing going on with those, and letting some of those punch up a little bit. Yeah, that's what I had there. How's that taking for you? Any additional thoughts you want to add to that one?
I've got a question.
Mm-hmm.
Did you study or train to become so bold with your lighting and colors?
I hadn't really
How
thought
to
about
train
it in
that?
that, and
I mean, there's so many overpaints and artists critiquing and stuff, but this is really something super special to you, I'd say. So it is. It's amazing how much impact that has. It is crazy. I can imagine this being now a card for Magic, to be honest. It's like you up the game with like 10 minutes overpaint. And the chat and me, we want to know how you do that Magic, how to get there, what to train, what to
you know,
look for.
that's honestly a really good question, and I guess I hadn't really thought about it in those terms before. Now I'm trying to just take a moment and think about it. I know for starters, lighting has been one of the, how would you say it? One of the things that I've loved most about art, about movies, about photographs. It's the feeling of light in a scene, and the sort of just the beauty. I love the beauty of the contrast of like values, and looking at the value difference between this plane and that plane, and the hard bright whites against the dark blacks, and so I've always had a desire to learn about that, and to improve that. I don't think in the past if of specific things I might have done in order to try to improve it. I know that I've just spent a lot of time studying artwork, and just looking at other people's pieces and seeing why does this work? Why do you have a good sense of light on this piece and not on this piece? What are they doing that's getting that feeling? And another thing is trying to adapt it, like seeing somebody else's art, seeing a photograph, and getting the lighting in that image and trying to apply it to my subject. It's not even following the it's not following the subject. It's just saying, okay, they have a strong backlight, and then they have a front light, and then there's the fill light, and there's atmosphere, and so that's part of it. So right now I'm just I'm walking through that thought process of kind of what's involved in it, and seeing if I can come up with a good answer to this. I would say that another factor would be doing studies of cinematography and photography. Literally, like sitting down and watching tutorials and courses on how to do cinematography for movies, learning how they set up lights, and learning what different kinds of lights there are, and learning how to balance them, and just listening to it as if you were learning how to be a DP, a director of photography, on a movie. and there's a lot to be learned in that. So when I'm looking at this, one of the things that I'm thinking of is if this was a real subject and these were actors in suits on a set and I had to set up the lights, what would I do? How would you film this? And so I'm literally just thinking about, well, if that's light there, then it would light things like this. And then I would not be able to have I don't want to have a dark leg there against a dark hand, so they would have to put atmosphere in there in order to make that work. And so that's part of it. And same thing with just regular photography and reading a bunch of photography books and learning how photographers handle lighting, how they use lighting to their advantage. Um, I'll have to give some thought. I have obviously wrote a book on lighting, understanding lighting, and it wasn't particularly in depth. It's not like it just really went into a lot of options and stuff, and it covers a lot of things, and I think it gives you a good introduction to the topic. Somebody mentions Em mentions James Gurney. James Gurney has a lot of good information on lighting as well, and his book where he talks about that and color gamuts and different kinds of lighting situations. Um, that's just a meandering answer. Can I clarify that for you, or am I not? Is
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. It's like it's a good way to make to answer the question rather than yeah, it's experience or yeah, you have to
Mm-hmm.
train it or you have to do a lot of studies. So I think this was a good direction to what kind of so what can you do? Where can you go?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a good
It
one.
it is one of those things where, and I was talking to somebody in a consult along this lines where I'm gonna make a new line here. Let's see, grab me somebody. Well, you have your fundamentals, and so you have the ground level down here, right? And everybody starts here, and you have all these fundamentals, and you've got to learn all these fundamentals, and you could think of them maybe as rungs on a ladder. And so you're learning you're learning basic drawing, you're learning anatomy, you're learning shading, you're learning all these things. And well, you go up and up and up and up and up. And once you basically have a handle on this stuff, then you'll find that you get up to this level. And from here, you can go different directions. And this is where it kind of becomes almost like electives in college, right? And it's just sort of like advanced studies where, and the guy that I was talking to, he wants to go for more of the Warcraft, slightly League of Legends sort of stylized thing. But you still have to learn all the fundamentals because fundamentals are fun. Fundamentals. And because those apply to everything. That still applies to the stylized stuff. Now, I went through that. I wasn't as interested in stylized stuff, so I started kind of focusing on like dramatic lighting. I love the topic of lighting. Now, lighting is covered in the basics of lighting is covered in fundamentals, but just because it's a topic I really like, I've sort of got up here and then I started going that direction where I'd study that more in depth and got a beyond fundamental understanding of it. And this is a topic that you really only get good at after you get up the ladder of fundamentals because it affects all of these, right? The lighting affects your values, it affects your colors. It can even go to affect how you compose your scene. And you have to have a good basis on all this for this to be learnable. And not always the case. I've come across like two people that were really good with lighting that couldn't actually draw things very well. So it's not very common. Um, but yeah, that's just kind of more meandering thoughts on the topic. I could possibly consider trying to put together a Patreon video or something. I'm not even sure what I
Yeah.
would cover that would be different than what I've already covered. But hey, maybe. Maybe if I think about it, I come up with something.
Yeah. Give it a thought.
Yeah. Now going forwards, I am going to try to get the first couple of lessons of the material course and go ahead and release them through Patreon this month. Well, it'd be the first of next month. Yeah. So I'm going to try to finish my commission next week and then get the first maybe 3 lessons of the materials course done and release them. So if you're interested in that, then that would be good. I know, Anna, you mentioned in the past, maybe you just need to release them, by lessons. And I think ultimately, I mean, that's what I have to do. I wanted to just be able to release the whole course at once, but it's just, right now, it's just too much time to put in without having to set aside everything else to make it happen. So if I can be doing it and releasing it in batches, it's just more feasible. Okay, well, I think that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Yeah, huge thanks to Tyler. He had to take off earlier, but it was great having him. And thank you again for joining Anna and passing
Yeah.
along
Thanks
questions.
for having me.
And of course, you guys can check
Yeah.
us out and catch us on the Discord and Facebook group, etc. And if you want to get in on the MTG theme challenge tomorrow, I'll be putting tickets up for sale. So swing by theswatchesart.com and pick them up. Where is Streamlabs? That's going to wrap it up for now. So remember, guys, every painting has a painter. Now, creation, it has a creator. Do you know your creator? I do. He's a friend of mine. I talk to him every day. And if you don't know him, go read the book of Matthew. And you don't want the first time to meet him be a time where you didn't know him. So make sure you're going to go meet a friend. I'm going to meet a friend. He's, here's a thought. I was thinking about this earlier. You can tell a lot about a creator by what they make. Because no creator, you, me, anybody, can create anything beyond what they're capable of imagining. If I can't comprehend it, if I can't think of it, I can't make it. I also cannot make anything beyond my resources. If I don't have the paints to paint it, I can't paint it. If I don't have enough stone to, sculpt it, I can't sculpt it. And I also cannot paint anything more beautiful than I can comprehend. Right? So, no matter what I make, it has to be smaller than me. It has to be a piece of me. And every one of my images that I've ever made is somehow a piece of what I understand, of what I know. And what I make can never exceed me. And so we can see the same thing about where we live. We can look at the complexity of the world and physics and everything else. And we can understand that the being that created it had to be able to comprehend it. So he's infinitely intelligent. The world is also a beautiful place. I mean, just look at the Hubble telescope and look at the galaxies and look at the nebula. It's a beautiful universe. But it's not more beautiful than could have been comprehended or it couldn't have been made. So I have an imagination like this. He has an imagination like this. You want to know somebody that has an imagination like that. Not mine. Mine's pitiful. But I just try to do better. So take care, guys. Have a great week. And look forward to seeing you guys hop in the new challenge. Until next time, keep drawing.